The musical Buena Vista Social Club, which just began an open-ended run on Broadway, traces the origins of the Cuban music supergroup that rose to international fame after their Grammy-winning 1997 album and 1999 Wim Wenders documentary of the same name. It was written by Miami-born Cuban-American Marco Ramirez, and while you probably didn't know it, there's a good chance you watched his work before. He's written on television shows like Orange is the New Black, Sons of Anarchy, Daredevil, and his latest, La Máquina, starring Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal. And while he's contractually forbidden from talking about any of the current projects he's working on, trust me, he's one of Hollywood's most in-demand writers. I wanted to know more about how the show came to be and who the man behind the words were, so I grabbed lunch with Marco at a Cuban lunch spot a few blocks from the theater called Margon to chat about how he first became acquainted with the Buena Vista Social Club, what he's hoping audiences take away, the creative team's multiple trips to Cuba, and what it's like to make his Broadway debut. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Marco Ramirez.
Hi, Marco.
Hi. Oh, no, I see your notes.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. Fine. Hi. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for making the time. I know you're busy. Where are you just coming from?
I just walked here from the theater, which luckily is a block and a half away. So I just came from our final rehearsal. They're just doing final tweets on lights and movement stuff and stuff that I cannot be helpful with in any way. So I'm just like, all right, good and ducka.
You grew up with this music playing out of a yellow boombox.
My grandfather had one that was over my grandparents' washing machine in their house in Hialeah. He had a stack of tapes of all these cassettes, recordings and re-recordings of Benny Modesta, of Orquesta Aragon, of Celia Cruz, of Olga Guillot. It was all the kind of what we would consider Golden Age Cuban music. Yeah. When I brought them the Buena Vista record, when it first came out, I said, hey, I think you might like this.
You introduced your grandparents to the Buena Vista Social Club?
I mean, they knew 90% of these songs.
But to this specific
record, yeah, they weren't going to buy new CDs. He had that stack of cassettes. Why did he need new music? Yeah, we connected about the liner notes. The same way as like two teenagers would do. Opening the Nirvana liner notes and saying, look at this, these lyrics, look at this stuff. That's what I was doing with my grandparents.
I'm Cuban, you're Cuban. We grew up with this music. Did you feel any anxiety, any nervousness about holding with the mantle of, I don't know, our Cuban identity?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I felt the responsibility to the music. To me, Cuba was a place where music came from. I have felt like a protector to some degree of the music throughout this process. And I feel a little bit like Indiana Jones running through a temple where tons of things are being thrown at you and you're kind of pivot and you're just trying to save the one beautiful thing because you're like, this belongs in a museum. That's me. And I feel that way about this music really passionately.
When the first kind of whispers of the show were coming to you, how did you feel? And kind of take us through the early days of that.
It was an immediate yes. It was like I was on Family Feud and they asked the question. I was like, wham, on the buzzer. As a commercial producer approached me, and his name is Orin Wolf, and he had done a show called The Band's Visit on Broadway, which was very successful and very beautiful and moving musical. He came to me and said, I love this music. I think there's a theater project here. Can we start talking about it? And my response was like, yes, in all caps. From that point on, we were in lockstep and walking together on this journey. And we went to Cuba several times. We met with a lot of the musicians. We went to Mexico to meet with some of the musicians' families who live there. We've been kind of globetrotting and we really feel protective over this music, and we've been doing it together. That was the beginning of it, was a producer said, hey, I think there's something here. And I yelled as loud as I could, yes, there is.
This album represented kind of your grandparents, a lot of your youth. What does it mean to you now looking back?
I think it's entirely about honoring what came before us. And we live in a world that is fascinated with what's new and what's young. Older is often thrown aside. Music is the only place where they really respect when an instrument ages. When a laptop ages, it got thrown away. But in the world of music, somebody's like, well, this violin is 100 years old. This piano is 200 years old. Age is seen as a sign of quality because it has endured. And so I think for me, especially now that I've gotten older, I'm closer to the age of the musicians than ever. And I'm realizing, oh, this whole thing, one of the reasons this struck is it reminded the world to kind of take a beat, stop looking for the new thing and actually look back and just with reverence, look at some of the older things.
When you were kind of digging into their histories and unearthing their legends,
About 15 minutes into our discussion, Marco got a text asking if he could head back to the theater for one last creative session. It was the final rehearsal after all. So I walked him through Times Square to the theater and hit him with a few more questions along the way.
You were here at like 18, seeing shows with some of the people that are producing this one.
Yeah.
What was it like to come and see?
It was amazing. I mean, I used to stand in line and do the rush ticket thing. I used to be here at 5 in the morning so that I could
What show did you see?
see a show for $25.
What show did you wait?
I saw John Leguizamo's Sexaholics that way. I saw the musical Aida that way. I would just go see whatever there was. I figured I left Miami, I was here, I was gonna watch as much of it as I could. And one of the first shows I ever saw on Broadway was Def Poetry Jam. I was up at 5 or 6 in the morning to stand in line to see John Leguizamo.
When you were
In undergrad, what did you see for yourself as your future before you had booked a single professional job as a writer?
Broadway was not even anywhere on the picture, but I thought I want to write plays. I want to get them produced or produce them myself, which, we did. For some weird arbitrary reason, I told myself, and when I'm 40, I can write TV. It was like a weird rule. I was like, that's something 40-year-old people do. But at the age of 18, 19, 20, all I was trying to do was get a couple productions of my plays done anywhere that would do them.
What do you have left to do? I guess it's all over for you, huh?
It's all downhill. No, I'm really hoping that next year I'll get traded to the Miami Heat.
Nice.
That's my goal.
You take Jimmy's salary?
I take Venmo. They can pay me however they want. I'll take a lot less than Jimmy's salary.
Finally, we finished our chat at a bar nearby.
This record for me was the high watermark of what music could do. This record was the proof that Cuban compositions belonged right next to Beethoven. In some ways, that became kind of the rallying cry of the whole piece. Is we just want to fight for some space and some respect. When did the Mount Rushmore just suddenly become Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, right? Rachmaninoff, all the names that we know. Who's to say that there aren't other people from other places, from other continents who deserve to be on that, considered canonically the best music ever made? A lot of these songs, they are all-timers. They're up there, the melodies are up there with the most beautiful melodies ever made.
There is a distance between the life that you live, born and raised in Miami, and the life that they live, born and dying in Cuba. How did you close that distance to be able to kind of enter their souls and give them words and life?
I think the first step was acknowledging my privilege, but also that my experience was never going to be the experience of somebody who was born and raised and lived in Cuba. I do not have the same lived experience as people who have just lived it, both the joys and the sorrows of it. That is what made visiting it so insightful, was just being there and interacting with a lot of people who had never left the island. But really just trying to inhabit the point of view of these artists who were born and raised and died there. And what it must have felt like for them, for the outside world, to keep looking at their music and saying, oh my God, it's so lovely, it's so beautiful, everything is it's just so filled with exotic flavor, and it's just so romantic. But for them to not really understand, fully comprehend the level of suffering that went into the songwriting, the level of suffering that went into the performance, even just the agony of practice to be able to play like Leo, our pianist, Fernecito, our tres player, like the amount of hours spent alone in a room with an instrument to be able to solo in a huge way and like be the Jimi Hendrix of the tres. So that's a lot of work and heartache and sacrifice. A lot of parties those guys didn't go to so that today they could be the party.
Finally, I had one last really easy question to ask him. What drives you to write?
Oh God, I'm not good at anything else, Nick. I'm not even sure I'm good at this. What's the question? What drives me to write?
What drives you to write?
I do fundamentally believe in the power of storytelling and stories, whether or not that's theater or movies or books. It is a way that we make sense of the world, and I believe in that as an art form, like one believes in Santa Claus.
What's it like to finally get to this point where you can't touch it anymore? It's out of your hands, and this is the script that's gonna go in black and white forever.
A lot of therapy, a lot of meditation are gonna help me through the next week. I genuinely hope that people like it, but I'm proud of it. Most importantly, it's been a lot of fun to